Hello and welcome to another my NTND marriage video channel. Filming this video right after the other one because now that I have an actual life, finding time to film has become really difficult. It's got to be the right everything and you have no idea, like wind, kids being home and noisy, it's become kind of hard, and nobody home, nobody to walk in on me and disrupt me and all of that. So I wanted to talk today about Cassandra syndrome within the children who have siblings who are on the spectrum. In the video where I talked about finding myself, I talked about how having children meant that I was kind of stuck at home and not really able to do much, and not really having sort of babysitters and such to look after the children. But on top of that, I found myself in a really interesting situation which many of you may be able to relate to if you have children and if you have some on the spectrum and some who aren't. And that is realizing that one of your children is special needs. Now, I didn't know that he was special needs. I had no idea he was on the spectrum, just that he was different to his other siblings. And the ones that are older than him were okay, but the younger sibling really suffered. And so I couldn't go out and leave them with people. How am I going to explain to a babysitter, you cannot leave them alone for even a moment, you must helicopter them because the big one's going to hurt the little one? It just sounds psycho, even saying it just sounds, you know. And so there were very few people that I could even remotely fathom the potential of having them babysit. They had to know the situation and not be really judgy and really be on top of it, and there was not a lot of people around me that I could have relied on in that case. And so in this situation, my son who's on the spectrum, he's not violent or aggressive or psychopathic or anything like this, but he does struggle to use his words. And he might tell you, don't do X, Y, Z. And then if you do it again, he'll just hurt you. He doesn't ask any questions. He doesn't say please and thank you. He just does something. An example is, we were at my cousin's house and he had picked up a toy. Nobody's touching that toy, but you know how children are, right? As soon as you touch that toy, everybody thinks it looks great and they want to have part of it, right? So he's playing with his toy, tinker, 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 and one of the cousins reaches over to grab the toy off him. And they're doing something like, oh, here, let me show you X, Y, Z, right? And my son, who's on the spectrum, is like, no, I don't want you to show me X, Y, Z. I'm playing with this toy. You're interrupting me. Bugger off. That's his thought process. His response was to grab the hand that was coming over the shoulder and rip it backwards. And he bends the thumb like so, and that person's now injured. So this is the situation that I find myself in. This child that doesn't use his words. He doesn't have the kind of, like, the flow of thought that I just expressed to you. Like, he's thinking it and it's going on, but he can't verbalize it. And he thinks that even if he does verbalize it, they're going to have grabbed the toy and run off with it by the time he gets the words out. So his response was usually just to grab, hurt, pull, yell. If he wasn't hurting somebody, he might yell. And in fact, him yelling at somebody at school is how the diagnosis for him came about, because one of the teachers realized from his responses of how he interacted with people at school who bothered him that there was something different going on. And she knew actually that he was on the spectrum, and she asked me for permission to have him tested, which we did, and that's how we found out. So it means that the younger sibling has had a really hard time of it. If I send him to go and knock on his brother's door to say dinner's ready, his brother would open the door and hurt him. And then I would go to the brother, the ASD brother, and be like, what gives? If I'd knocked on your door to say, hey, dinner's ready, you wouldn't have hurt me. And he said, well, you do it differently. He said, you knock and then wait for me to say yes. And then you say, or come in and then say what it is you need to say. He said, this brother just goes bing, 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 knocks on the door really annoying amount of times and then just barges in. And he'd said, I've told him not to do it that way and he keeps doing it that way, so now I just hurt him. Okay, right. So I would then have to be the one to go and knock on his door. You couldn't send the little one to do it. If they were playing in the lounge room, I could be filming them and then I would say, go to put the camera away, and no sooner have I stepped out of that room, the little one's crying because the big one has decided that he's not playing the game right, or he's got the wrong toy, or he's grabbed the toy he wants, and blah, 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 blah. Ridiculous stuff, ridiculous. So I had to be this really major helicopter parent, and which meant that working was an impossibility because it's really hard, firstly, to get a job in between 9 and 3 when you have to take your children to school and pick them up again. But also I just needed to be there monitoring them all of the time. I couldn't get anybody else to do it without explaining what was going on and not knowing that the other one was on the spectrum. We just thought he had violent tendencies or something. I don't know. I can't even remember exactly what it was that we thought. All I knew was that it wasn't safe to leave the little one alone with him. And so I stayed home for years, being this helicopter parent, trying to make sure that the little one was safe and happy and well looked after. Now they're teenagers, and that little one is having serious depression issues and having thoughts of ending his life because he feels that he has nothing to live for, life is boring, he's lost his joy. He sounds like me, exactly how I was feeling and have been feeling for the last 5 years. What's the point of life? It's so boring, there's nothing going on, I'm hating my existence, wow, 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 you know. And he's in the same boat, and I'm starting to realise that here's my little NT boy with Cassandra syndrome. He suffered alongside me suffering with the dad who's on the spectrum and him with his brother who's on the spectrum. And try as I might, I couldn't keep him mentally safe. So sad. So I was trying to keep him physically safe as much as possible, but in the end he suffered anyway. So it's a bit of a bummer, like parenting wise. I feel like I was hoping to do a really good job and I kind of didn't. I mean, I did, in that I kept him as safe as I possibly could, and I helicopter parented and did all sorts of stuff. I mean, one of the ways that I tried to keep him away from his brother was everywhere I went, I took the neurotypical son with me. So if I went to the toilet, he came with me to the toilet, even if it was just to stand outside the toilet, because then he was away from his brother. If I went up the street, he came with me. If I had a shower, he came with me. Obviously you get to a point like when he's 8, 9, 10, whatever, he doesn't want to be near you when you're in the toilet or the shower, obviously. You got to find a new plan. So then I'm only showering when they're in bed, you know, just crazy stuff, you know. I mean, obviously they go to school and so I've got that time. But that was the methods that I was going to try and keep them separated. But here's my neurotypical son, who's really sort of suffering from it now. So we'll like have dinner And the neurotypical son will be like, I don't want to sit at the table with you all because I don't like that brother and I don't want to be near him and I don't want to have another conversation at the dinner table about his special interest. And he's gotten to the point where he's really quite sort of vehemently against his brother. It's really quite sad and disturbing, and I kind of hope it passes, but I would understand if it didn't. And he says, even when you're at the dinner table and you're talking about anything else but the brother's special interest, the brother finds a way to weave that special interest into the conversation, and he can't stand it. He's even said to me, I've gotten to the point where I just hate the sound of his voice and I want nothing to do with him. So things have gotten very sort of dark and precarious here. And I'm trying to navigate it, you know. What do you do? I mean, like I say, I feel like I failed as a parent because I tried very hard to make sure that, you know, SHIT didn't hit the fan, but it kind of has. And so, you know, I mean, I'm looking after my youngest son. He's seeing somebody, a therapist. So, you know, first thing we did was jump on it and make sure that he was looked after. And I'm now trying to get him into sort of activities and such that that will bring him joy, that will get him out of the house, get him away from his brother a bit, even though he's now in such a funk that he barely wants to get out of bed and do anything. So that's kind of a bit tricky because I want him to start partaking in activities, but he's feeling so low that even the mere thought of an activity is like, so it's tricky. Anyway, so that's what I'm trying to navigate now, my son with Cassandra syndrome. I don't know if siblings outgrow that because they move away from their siblings and maybe there's less trauma about it. But in saying that, my brother, who is potentially on the spectrum, he was also violent as a child and as a teenager, and as an adult he just turned that violence into unbearable rage. If you say something he doesn't like, he will explode, just lose his mind, and you're there just like pooing your pants a little because he's super scary, just thinking, why did I speak? When's this going to be over? And he can go on a rant for 45 minutes. I mean, this dude, ick, right? So I've since removed him from my life because he didn't get better. He just kind of, I mean, he's just kind of not very tolerable. And it might have changed from like when he was little and he used to hurt me, when we were little and he used to hurt me, to now him being really rageful, and I didn't want him being around my children. So I suppose the answer to that is you don't necessarily outgrow your dislike or distrust or whatever it is that stems from that trauma that you had with your neurodiverse sibling. And again, we don't know that my brother is officially autistic. We just have assumptions based on certain behaviours. And even if he is an autistic, whatever he is, that volatile person that he's always been, who just doesn't express himself in any other way but rage and pain and anger, whatever he is, I like to avoid him. So will my children outgrow this? I don't know. I'd sort of hoped that they might, because I feel bad for my autistic son not having relationships with his siblings. That being said, as I said, the older siblings have been more spared because it's not such a thing. But there it is. We'll see. We'll wait and see. And over to you. Can you relate? Have you been in this situation with your own siblings? Are you dealing with this as a parent? If so, what advice do you have? What kind of things would you recommend for others? And maybe there isn't anything to recommend because it's just a losing battle. What do you think? Let me know below. Love to hear from you, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you found it helpful.